Larry Kelly from the law firm of Luxembourg, Garbutt, Kelly and George. She's a Pennsylvania super lawyer, a radio personality, and the head coach of the Shenango Wildcat baseball team that won the WPIF championship last year, 2 years ago. So he's a good buddy of mine, and I've asked him to introduce me, so here's Larry Kelly.
Yeah. Here's what I learned about my coaching career. If you got good players, you win. You got Ed Prence, Chuck Nardone on your team, Timmy Parrott, you win. My man over here, no, we got Nardones all around, Nicky. And if you don't, you lose, and you're only as good as your last game. I used to give signs, and they didn't even watch when I had it. I've known Ed Prence a long, long time. We actually competed against each other in high school. He played at Ellwood City, I played at Newcastle. He was a shortstop, I was a third baseman, and I know the book says that Newcastle never beat Ellwood City. That's what it says. There's a little fiction in that book. I remember, at least in my mind, a 1-0 game down at Ellwood City the year they played the Whitfield Championship, where we did win. Next time you write a book, please mention it. I've known Eddie a long time. Like I said, we competed against each other. We played adult baseball together for probably 15 years. He's a baseball player, so the book seems to suggest that, but in real life he really was. Most guys from Ellwood City, they knew how to play the game, and as I coach now, I find out that being called a baseball player is something that they don't even understand the meaning of. But if you played in Ellwood City or Beaver Falls back in the day, you knew how to play the game, and then he was a baseball player. Not only do we play baseball together, but he now consults for our law firm as an advertising, marketing specialist for us, and runs all of our TV advertising and makes suggestions. And when he makes a suggestion, we follow it. He, as much as he tries to hide it, he's a pretty intelligent guy. Notwithstanding what Liz might have to say about that. So we go back a long time, and we've been friends a long time. We've known each other a long time, which really, I think, puts me in a very unique perspective here to introduce him. Because I grew up in Newcastle, a little different than Ellwood City, Nardone, in case you don't realize. That's a little different than Ellwood. And my wife, Marisa, was a Pecoraro. Maybe some of you remember. Dave certainly knows her, goes to Holy Redeemer forever and ever. She didn't understand when we first got married how I would be with one of my friends, and I would basically be busting their chops. We used a different adjective in Newcastle back then because there's some women in the room. I'm not going to say what we called it. And they would bust mine. And I would explain to her, Marisa, we only do this with our friends. If we don't like you, if you're not one of our friends, we don't say anything. We may say hi, that's as far as it goes. But if you're one of our guys, we bust your chops. So I think today, as part of this introduction, since Eddie's one of my guys, Liz, if you don't mind, I got to bust his chops.
Go for it, Larry.
I started reading this book, okay? And I'm about halfway through it, and it's a great book, and I read his first book, and Eddie's a great writer. He actually helped me. He edited the book that I wrote, Cutting Down the Nets, that Buzz read. Did you cry at the end, Buzz?
I did.
A little bit. He actually helped me. He's a great writer, and when you read this book, it's a trip down memory lane. The songs that you make reference of, I know all of those songs, and it brought back some memories that I had growing up. But here's what I didn't have growing up in Newcastle. And maybe, I don't know, Nick, you grew up in Beaver Falls, maybe it's different. My man had a girlfriend at 10 years old. Who has a girlfriend at 10 years old? Wait a minute, I'm still playing board games at 10 years old. My man is getting all spruced up, putting his dad's aftershave on, and going to the dance to hold this girl's hand. I didn't hold the girl's hand till Marisa was 25 years old. My man's holding hands at 10. And not only, now listen, my man, you're a good looking guy. I'm going to give you that credit. Obviously you are, because you were able to lure Liz into marrying you. And by the way, when you read this book, you're going to read about a lot of different girls, okay? But none of them fit the bill that Liz fit. And that is that not only is she beautiful, but she's brilliant. In reading this book, like none of these women I thought became Rhodes Scholars somewhere down the road. My girl Lise was a geneticist, so I still don't know what that means, but I know it's incredible. So my man, he's a good-looking guy, but look, Brad Pitt, you're not. You understand? When you're walking down the street, and nobody going to say, "Oh, is that Brad Pitt walking down the street?" You listen, you're a good-looking guy, but you're not Brad Pitt. And the reason I say that, my man not only had one girl at 10, he had 2. My man had 2, and they were fighting over him in this book. I can't even imagine this. That there's 2 women, Liz, fighting over him? Really? You're going to heaven, Liz. So my man got all these girlfriends. He's kissing girls at 12 years old. I grew up in Newcastle. Look, the first girl's hand I think I held might have been when 20, I don't know. And I can say this, we do have one thing in common. You had a girlfriend in 9th grade, and I did too. But it lasted a week. It lasted a week. Why? Because her girlfriend said, "Oh, you know, Larry, you got to sit with her at lunchtime." What? I ain't sitting with her. And by the way, you didn't call her last. My man's calling girls every night. By the way, you didn't call her last night. What? What am I going to talk about? All I know is baseball and basketball and sports. What am I going to talk about? Fingernail polish. I ain't calling her. So after a week, this is how I got out of it. Maybe you can use this in your next life. I told my cousin Wynn, I said, "Hey, Sally really likes you. I think you ought to start calling her. And by the way, when you do, tell her I'm not her boyfriend anymore." So my man, he got boyfriends. And I'm going to leave you with this. I mean, the book is well written. It's really good. But I'm going to leave. Here's the difference between Ellwood City and Newcastle. Now, and I want somebody to correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, okay? I know a lot of girls from Ellwood City who marry guys from Newcastle. So maybe what we were doing, not holding hands at 10 years old or looking to sit on some, and my man, you got shot down a lot. Like Newcastle guys, we really didn't get shot. We were the shooters, not the shooters. You got shot down more than the guys that flew airplanes in World War II. So anyway, and I tell my wife this. I know a lot of guys, girls from Newcastle girls from Ellwood City who married guys from Newcastle.
You're the only one I know.
Wait a minute. I know a lot. But I don't know any Ellwood City girls. Let me stop this. I know a lot of Ellwood City girls that marry guys from Newcastle. I don't know any Newcastle girls ever married a guy from Ellwood. So, right here. That being said, right there, you get a Newcastle girl. Right here. Listen, write it down. Write it down. You're in a select class. So all I'm saying is, whatever you were doing, if part of this book is true, and you have grandchildren, which I know you do, those speeches you were giving to your son in this book were very good. I suggest you change the narrative. Ed Prence is not only my friend, but he's a great writer. He's really, really, really an intelligent guy, and anybody that reads his book is going to thoroughly, thoroughly enjoy it. I know I did, and I'm about halfway through. I'll give you the rest of the critique when I get to Ed Prence.
He's a hard act to follow. I have a few notes. He ad-libs everything. But he's right about the 10-year-old girlfriend.
I hope that wasn't true.
I was pretty big for 10 years old. I was a big kid all the way around, so I hung out mostly with 12-year-olds, like cousin Chuck, all his buddies. They were in 6th grade. I was in 4th grade. And I was the same size as them, so whatever they did, I did. They flipped baseball cards, I flipped baseball cards. They had girlfriends, I had girlfriends. We didn't really know what that meant at the time. But he's right. But there's one thing that came about because of this little girlfriend. And that is, gee, she was a perfect girlfriend. I mean, she said, "I like you," and I said, "I liked her," and that's about all it took. But we told anybody that would listen that we were girlfriend and boyfriend, and she was very loyal And if somebody said something nasty about me, she would jump all over him and defend me. It set my expectations for girls down the line. It set my expectations when I'd have a girlfriend or a girl that I liked in 8th grade, and I'd hear her saying something bad about me, or she'd be teasing me instead of about my hair or about my clothes or whatever. I would think little alarms would go off in my head. I didn't even know why, but it was because she set my expectations for what a girlfriend should be. And when they didn't meet those expectations, then I knew something was wrong. And in the story, my son comes home from college, and he's having trouble with a girl. He's in love with this girl, first real love, and she does to him what some of these girls used to do with me in grade school. They'll walk around, and she's insulting him in front of all his friends all the time, making fun of the way he wears his hair, making fun of the music that he likes. And so he'd break up with her. Well, when he'd break up with her, now she wanted him back. She'd come pounding at his door in the middle of the night, crying out in the hallway until his roommates would practically throw him out of the building. And eventually, he always went back with her. So he thought he was in love with this girl, but Dad, this was on the occasion of my 50th birthday. Actually, it's the character's 50th birthday. It's Teddy Trush's, Koppel isn't Rockland, but today it is. So my wife bought me this shirt for Christmas. So actually, Rockland would be a better name for Koppel. So she set my expectations, and those were my expectations for life. And that's what I tended to pass along to my son. I kept telling him stories because college-age kids don't really want advice from their dad. So if I didn't give him direct advice, but I kept telling him story after story after story, trying to show him the difference between a real relationship and a toxic relationship. And this girl was bad for him. Believe me, you wouldn't, I just didn't understand why he couldn't shake her loose. But eventually I got through to him. I'm not going to tell you the whole book. You got to read it. Okay, first of all, I want to start by saying this is a novel. It's a work of fiction. I'm not Teddy. He was smarter, a little better looking. I'm going to tell you some stories of being a baby boomer, growing up in a blue-collar town like Koppel was, and like Ellwood City was, and all the areas around here. Most of these were steel mill towns, and our fathers worked in the mills. The importance at that time, when we were growing up, it was very important what kind of a ball player you were. Football or basketball or baseball, but in Koppel it was always baseball. And you had a kind of a stature if you were a better player than some of the other kids your age. But those things changed. There was sports stature. Our parents taught us hard work. They taught us teamwork. Their fathers would go out and work overnight shifts. And we'd play ball the next day in the backyards. And if you couldn't play ball in the backyard of somebody whose father worked the night shift the night before, because if you woke up a sleeping father, you got calls. Your family got calls. And we got punished. Neil and I got whacked. We got whacked. Some of our other buddies would get grounded. Some of them had to do hard labor in their father's garden. But ours was always the whacks. And so you didn't want to wake up a sleeping father. You had to stay away from those yards. But that's what it was like growing up. I'm sure Ellwood City was kind of the same. You had people working shifts. So these are the values that we learned along the way. But Teddy's story is about a life like all our lives, that's impacted by the changing world around it. While I was in school, and just before when I was in grade school, there was a military draft. Now people today don't realize how big a deal that was, that you had to register for the draft when you hit 18. And they could take you right out of school. There was a lottery. I think they drew the first 200 numbers had to go to the war. And I was born in 1953, and that was the first year where the Supreme Court had ruled that there could be no student deferments anymore. It was unconstitutional because richer families could send their kids to college where poorer families couldn't. So those kids were getting shipped off to Vietnam 4 years before the ones that were in school. So now all of a sudden, the college deferment is gone. And we had been waiting all through grade school, 5th, 6th grade. Now the Vietnam War's going on, but it'll be over by the time we get there. And it wasn't over by the time we got there. So this thing dragged on, and now every kid in that school had a reference to the fact that they could be gone like that. And that takes away from the prestige of being a sports star. They start thinking more about your grades weren't even important. You had to be political. You had to state your views. You had to be more involved than just the superficial things like sports or getting on the prom court or things that used to be important were gradually becoming less important. There was also segregation going on at the time. And when that happened, there was a busing issue. They would take black students and send them to white school districts. It didn't usually work the other way, but for the people in Coppell, it did work the other way, because there was a movement in Beaver County to, there were a lot of richer people in White Township and Chippewa, still very affluent areas, but their property values didn't go up because they were being sent to Beaver Falls High School. And Beaver Falls High School was 30 or 40% black. And so just the fact that they were being sent to what was considered a poorer high school, their property values stayed down. So these people decided they were going to start their own high school. And they went through all the qualifications that you have to do such a thing. And that high school was Black Hawk High School. So when it was all over, when they had finally made these changes, first of all, the values in Chippewa, all the property values went up. They're still up. And the county could tax you based on the value of your property. So that was a windfall for Beaver County. They were bringing in all this money from these new properties, and all they had to do was let 30% of the white kids in Beaver Falls go to Black Hawk. Well, that left them, now the balance was maybe 50-50, white and black. And so the county commissioners started looking around for where could they get more white students. And one of the places was Coppell. Coppell was actually part of the Beaver Falls School District. But since Ellwood City was only 5 miles away, less than that even, we had always gone, people from Coppell had always gone to Ellwood City High School. And so the values were changing in that way too, because now my brother was in class of 73. I was class of 72. My class of 72 went to Ellwood City. His class of 73 and all the ones after that went to Beaver Falls. And it was a difference, and it changed the values, and it changed the loyalties of the town. I had grown up in Coppell and as a baseball player, and everybody in Coppell knew me and loved me, and when I got to high school, every year there'd be more and more of them that were rooting for Beaver Falls instead. So those kind of loyalties changed all of us. Social values, like I said, were changing. There's less importance on sports, on grades, on religion. I don't remember exactly, this is a work of fiction, so I don't remember exactly what song was playing when I was dancing with little Molly. I don't really remember the count on Rich Herman when he hit one off the wall to get us into the finals in the 1971 baseball team. I don't, so I made those things up. I mean, I kind of winged it. It's too hard to research a whole era, but it's easy to recount my memories. They're not accurate, but they're easy to find. So again, Larry, I appreciated you busting my chops for the cute childhood romances. And they are at that age, they're cute and they're meaningless. But are they really? If you're lucky, they can be an obstacle you have to, if you're unlucky, they can be an obstacle you have to overcome over and over again. When I was 10 years old, I was crazy about this girl in my 4th grade class, and luckily, she was crazy about me. That made all the difference, because we used to meet every Friday night at the flying saucer roller rink in Coppell. In Ellwood, they mostly went to the Ellport roller rink. But we would meet on Fridays, we'd do the couple skate, hold hands, and I can still hear Milan Pavlovic saying, the next is an all skate. I'm sure this went on all over. But, you know, and at 9 o'clock, it started at 7 o'clock. We'd skate for a couple hours, and at 9 o'clock in Coppell, they had added a record hop. So when it hit 9 o'clock, everybody went and took off their skates, put on their nice cool street shoes, and walked up to the roller rink where they started playing music. It was a record hop. And there's where you got to hold your girlfriend. Slow dances would come on, and we'd be right there, and everybody knew whose girlfriend was who by who they were dancing with. And it affected us for a long time. You know, we'd get teased mercilessly, since we were the only 10-year-olds out there. We'd get teased mercilessly by the older kids. But when I was with her, I didn't care. You know, I was just, she'd stare in my eyes, and I'd stare in her eyes, and I didn't look at anybody else. I didn't think about being people making fun of me. I didn't think about the crowd. So everyone else kind of disappeared. And if a kid in my class tried to make fun of us, they would say to her, "Oh, you like Eddie Prence?" And she would just say, "So?" You know, she'd say, "No, Eddie and Lori sitting in a tree, Kissing." And she said, "Are you jealous?" It was, so I learned that a girlfriend was loyal to you, that a girlfriend stuck up for you. Of course, we never did any kissing. We were too young for that.
Yeah.
But if I was a baseball player. If I hit a home run, she said I was wonderful. If I struck out, she said I was wonderful. There was another kid in our class, the son of a bitch. He liked this girl as much as I did. So we were playing ball one day, and I'm in the batting cage. And the pitches are coming in, and I think we were facing Lawson that day, who was almost unhittable. And I got 2 strikes on me. And I could hear him teasing my girlfriend behind, your boyfriend's gonna strike out, he's gonna strike out. And she laughed and said, "I don't care if he strikes out." She said, "I care because he cares. But to me, it doesn't make any difference." I mean, that's the kind of loyalty. That's a 10-year-old girl. You don't get that kind of loyalty from your wife half the time. In my case, bottom line,
I have it on tape.
so after every game, she was there, smiling, lifting my mood. She'd put on my baseball glove, and I'd throw her the ball, and we'd loosen up that way. And this is a big deal. This became a big deal in Coppell. She wrote her name on the inside brim of my hat. Lori, and she put a little flower over the eyes. And everybody would make fun of me about it in the dugout. I'd say, "So what? She's my girlfriend." And you know, by the end of the season, every kid on that team had some little girl's name. So Coppell was different than Newcastle was. And Ellwood City. But we were always comfortable together. Conversation always came pretty easy. I found out she was a talker. And I guess girls had to be a talker in those days because the boys weren't going to carry the conversation. But I found out if I asked her a question, she'd take off from there. And as soon as the conversation would have a lull, I'd ask her another question, and boom, we were right back. So it was easy. I thought, oh, this is going to be an easy life with women. Well, that's not exactly how it came. What happened? This went on through thick and thin, in the good times and especially the bad times. Our Little League All-Star team won a big tournament in Newcastle in 1964. I was 10 years old. And we celebrated together. And when JFK got assassinated, we sat in the back of the classroom and cried together. So it was, how did this little girl school romance affect the rest of my life? Well, how do you think? I mean, it was trained in me. It was ingrained in me. By definition, a girlfriend was always proud of you. You always loved to see her. And like I said, later, I don't even remember why we broke up, but we were 10, so it didn't take much. But after that, anytime I'd be chasing a girl around or she was chasing me around, it wasn't the same. It was, and again, bells would go off in my head. Some little girl would make, your niece is one of them. Always making fun of me, always kidding me. She just wanted attention, but the fact was, I thought, that's not right. Something's not right with that. So,
That had to be married.
yeah. Yeah, that was, although I'll swear in court that it wasn't. But I was having a problem with two girls in high school. One I really liked, but she had like another kid that she was dating. She wouldn't always defend me, and she wouldn't always stick up for me. And we'd have some great night dancing at the high school dance where we'd be all over each other, so to speak. And she would, the next day, she acted like it never happened. So I had her going on, and then I had this other girl, just as beautiful, just as sweet, who was very, very loyal to me, and I married her. But I went to see my senior year in high school. I went up to visit my cousin Chuck at Duquesne, and he and his buddy. He said, "Well, I can help you decide what girl you should be with." He said, "Me and Joe, we decided this is the perfect girl." He put on a record by the band, and one of their songs was called "Up on Cripple Creek," and every verse is the same way. Up on Cripple Creek, she sends me. If I spring a leak, she mends me. I don't have to speak, she defends me. A drunkard's dream if I ever did see her. Now, I don't want a drunkard's dream, girl, but it means when you're bottom out. When you hit rock bottom, this girl's still gonna stick with you. And he and his buddy, Duquesne, said, that's what the ideal girl is. So we made up an index. That girl was 100 index, the girl in the song. And then we would measure whoever we were going out with from 0 to 100 as to how loyal they were, and that's the girl that you should really stay with. So up on Cripple Creek, she sends me, that means you think she's beautiful, that you want to be around her all the time. If I spring a leak, she mends me. That meant when things go wrong, she's around to make you whole again. She's around when you're sick, she brings you soup. When my father passed away, Liz was at the funeral home passing out sandwiches, staying with my mother at the casket. She was special. I don't have to speak. She defends me. What happens when somebody attacks you and you're not around? Does she defend you? Or does she just decide that keep her mouth shut and not take a stand with you? So those are the things that he said we should be rating them. So I put my girls based my girls against the Cripple Creek Index, and this one by about 30 points. But I thought about that. My first girlfriend was just the same. She was almost 100 index when I was 10. So my first girlfriend and my last girlfriend were the same. They were the kind of girl you want to spend your life with, the one you should spend your life with, not these, like the girl that my son was chasing around who liked being around him but had to keep putting him down for God knows what reason. It's a nostalgic story, and a lot of it takes place in 1971 when this baseball team, and these, by the way, these are the last 3 Papa Boys who ever played in Ellwood City, for Ellwood City. That's me, Skip Goshio, and John Huffman, the late John Huffman. So we were the last 3. When Chuck was there, and a year before that, most Coppell people were still Ellwood City fans because only the freshmen at that point were going to be Fall. When I got to be a junior, now you had 2 years of Coppell kids that were going to be Fall. And in the end, when I was a senior, my class was the only class that was going to Ellwood City, and all the people from Coppell, the ones I had seen all my life, who had been cheering for me all my life, their loyalties had changed. Now I was a bum, now They're trying to, they're cheering to beat me. Nick was among those first calls. He didn't call me a bum. But the loyalties changed to him and his crew. This, most of all, is a father and son story. It's explaining the toxic relationship to his son without just giving advice, just by telling stories. And honestly, if it comes to the Cripple Creek Index, if you put me on the Cripple Creek Index, I wouldn't have scored 100 either. So I didn't hold myself to the same standards that I held the girl to. But I guess I had to say that. So it's a love story. It's a nostalgic story. And part of that 1971 was we weren't expected to be a great team. Ellwood had had great teams in 1969, 1968 they won the WPIAL. 1969 they had a great team. 1970 Bill Spellman called it the best team they ever had. Well, they weren't saying that kind of thing about the 1971 team. But we knew we were pretty good. We only had one returning letterman, so we had to prove ourselves. But we knew we were a pretty good team. And then Bill Spellman, who was the coach in those days, he had the philosophy that the only way to practice for baseball was to play baseball. So we played 1,000,000 games. He would schedule games one day after Easter. It was the Monday after Easter, and he scheduled 2 doubleheaders. We played 2 games against Beaver in the morning and a twilight doubleheader against Butler at night. None of them were cupcake teams, and we won all 4 games. We weren't better than these teams. We didn't have more talent, but we were more well practiced. We knew each other. We knew where the cutoff man was going to be. We knew how to bunt and move somebody over. We knew what we were going to do because we played so much. When we got to the championship game at Three Rivers, we played a team, Highlands. They were 18-1. We were 30-6. So we had played twice as many games as they had. And that mattered. You know, that mattered as far as us being able to beat some of these teams that we really shouldn't have been able to beat. But we thought we were great. And so we were all the heroes of the school. Well, it's easy to go girl when you're a hero. You know, when everybody's patting you on the back and telling you how wonderful you are, well, that makes it easier when you go scouting around for a girlfriend. But that year came tumbling down. And again, I won't give it away exactly what happened that year, but we lost that championship game. And I was partly responsible for that. So all of a sudden, I was the GOAT. Now, today, being GOAT has changed meaning. It used to be, you were the hero, and if you were the GOAT, that meant they blamed you for a loss, or they blamed you for, now GOAT means greatest of all time. So I don't know what to substitute for GOAT. I guess it was, the person that caught the most grief about their performance. And I had a great season, and it got to the end, and it didn't work out. And it also, girls who had been very attentive to me all of a sudden were not so attentive. And if somebody's saying, oh, Ed Prence choked, he did this, he did that, and she would agree with them. So I had to get rid of her. I mean, this is a sports story, but it's told by a father to help his son navigate a toxic relationship. Not with preaching to him, and not with setting limits or giving him unwanted advice, but just by telling him stories over and over again. To lead him to what he already knew. Something was wrong with his relationship. Here's what happened to me. I said, what can you learn from that? And this went, somebody told me it's unbelievable that we talked all night. In the book, you'll see we talked all night about this and didn't go to bed till 10 o'clock the next day, maybe noon the next day. But that's really what happened. I can't change the reality of that. But I would tell them stories and tell them what I learned from it. And one of the stories was about senior year, when we went up to play Beaver Falls in Beaver Falls. And we were both still, I think we were 3-3, they were 3-3. You were battling for your survival to stay in a playoff race. And I went up there, and most of the Koppel fans were rooting for Beaver Falls, including a girl that I thought walked on water from Coppell. She was the girl I chased around for years and years in Coppell, and here she was sitting in the stands yelling, "He stinks, he stinks." They got to a point where the score was tied, we had runners on second and third with 2 outs, and I came to the plate. And I was our leading hitter. They should have walked me. To load the bases would have been easier to get out of the inning with the bases loaded, and I wasn't our best hitter. But the pitcher they had, his coach came out to talk to him. I know he was telling him to put me on. And this kid's stomping around, crying and bitching. And finally, this prima donna talked his coach into letting him pitch to me. And all these scouts are there, and I know he wanted to show these scouts what he could do. I hit the first pitch over the steel mill, over the tracks, over the scrap steel in left field. I mean, it was the furthest I ever hit a ball. And when I'm running around, jogging around the bases, I could hear my little Coppell ex-girlfriend saying, "You're lucky, you're lucky." and when I made the rounds, she was doing this to choke. And then my girlfriend at the time was Liz by that time. And it was spring, senior year. And like I said, there were scouts everywhere. Chucky brought the Duquesne coach with him who was scouting me. The 2 radio stations were broadcasting the game. And I was starting around the bases and I could hear yelling, "Oh, way to go, Ed Prence. That's Ed Prence. That's number 11. He's our shortstop." She kept saying over and over, saying my whole name over and over again. And I thought, it's kind of embarrassing. But as I got around third base, I thought, oh my. I looked over and I could barely see her because these scouts had their machines out to measure the speed of the pitches and everything. And they were all sitting in one area, and the broadcasters were sitting there, and she was sitting right in the middle of them. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what she's doing. She's saying it so they hear my name. She's saying it so they say it on the radio. So the scouts write it down on their books. "Oh, Ed Prence, oh, Ed Prence." It was great. But that was the difference. There were girls that would turn on you, and there were girls that would never turn on you. So that's the lesson that I learned growing up in Coppell, learned from my cousin Chuck and the Cripple Creek Index. There was something else about, I felt abandoned kind of, because not only by the girl, but by Coppell. We were playing in Beaver Falls, and like I said, they were people that had rooted for me all my life, and now the loyalties have completely changed. They politely applauded, most of them, except for the girl that was yelling, "You're lying." And it was, I needed somebody and something to cling to, and Liz was steadfast. And I think that my son got the idea from that what you need is a girl who's going to stand with you, who sees you as a team, who thinks of you, who's always trying to do something for the team of you and her. Not somebody who's putting you down so she looks better in front of her friends. Not somebody who only cares about you when she loses you or when you break up with her, but somebody who's there through thick and thin. So one more time, the Cripple Creek Index. The lines are, up on Cripple Creek, she sends me. If I spring a leak, she mends me. I don't have to speak, she defends me. If you find a girl like that, don't let her go. And that's the lesson he learned that night, and I won't give away the end of the book, but he learned the lesson pretty well. So again, thank you for coming, and if anybody still needs to get books, most of you got them beforehand, but I'll be up here signing books, and if you bought them before, bring them with you, and I'll sign them. But thanks again.